All right, are we live? Are we good? Are we going? Give it a few seconds, guys. Let me just send out all the invitations. I got 3 different teas ready to keep me awake. I hope you all can hear me. I'm going to check the sound right now. Make sure we're good. Here, let's make sure we got sound coming from my...
Married to somebody else and they try to get married again, well, that second marriage is declared null. The guy's already married to somebody else, for example. He's not free to marry. Now, the question, now, if you have marriages between either 2 non-baptized people or only 1 baptized person, these are...
All right, so what we are doing today is going to be a little bit different. I am back in StreamYard because I do want Deconverted Man to come into the chat. I don't know if he will. We were going back and forth for the last 2 days on the run of my videos, so I'd like to have that conversation here. And there's a few other things that we need to talk about that we might get to later today. But right now we're going to start off with some Trent versus Redeemed Zoomer, who claims that he might be switching his denomination. I don't know if that's true, but that's what he's saying. We are in StreamYard, which means anybody can join. We can have as many people we want in here. Also, Mindshift, who I did the very first video countering him, has now gotten mentioned both on Trent and on Gavin Ortland's channel with video and interaction, personal interaction. And yet I haven't gotten any attention, which makes me feel like I need to change something up because I've been doing this for a long time. And my 2 favorite apologists look at me at persona non grata, and the Dark Magisterium, their boy, Dr. Keep, whatever, does not like me at all. So I'm hated by all sides. That's great. Shows you're doing something right. All right. I'm going to send out the invitations in just a minute, and we'll get going. Okay. So let's hit play.
Dissoluble. They can be dissolved because they are not raised to the level of sacrament. They don't have that quality of being a Christian marriage. So when Paul says, for example, so we would refer to that as the Petrine privilege and the Pauline privilege in the church's canon law. So the Pauline privilege would be that if two, I'm gonna get reamed over this if I get this wrong, because the Caligansis guy's got to get everything right. The basic idea of canon law is that if two unbelievers are married, and one of them becomes a believer, and the unbeliever abandons that person because they've chosen to become Christian, that union can be dissolved.
That's what Scripture says. If there's abandonment, then
right. But we wouldn't say now if 2 baptized Christians get married, and there is and one abandons the other later, the privilege would not apply there. Both of them are held under the command.
Now, see, that's kind of interesting because I'm married to an atheist. Wow, that's just not going to stop doing that, is it? I am married to an atheist. My bishop knows. My priest knows. The priest before him, they gave me the okay. How do I stop that? Stop doing that. So, yeah, my priest knows, my bishop knows. We're working on getting it official within the church, but everything's on the up and up. So it's kind of interesting that when Redeemed Zoomer was talking about this in his Twitter, he didn't realize that he started going into ethno-nationalism, and he didn't realize that he started going into racism. Because it's possible to have this argument without being racist. Like, you can argue that you need to be equally yoked, but his wording was going toward only a certain type of Christian is the right kind of Christian. It's kind of the no true Scotsman, but like in an extremist way. So that's interesting.
Commands of Christ and his church, and the marriage is still valid. The marriage is still valid, even if tragically one spouse has left the other.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be different there. So I think what's interesting here is you're positing that it's sinful, but I think many Protestants would probably they might say it's not a great idea, but I don't know if they would say that it's like a sin. And then of course it's like, is it a minor sin or is it a major sin?
So I'm planning to get married in the PCA. My soon-to-be fiance and I, in the PCA, they have strict rules on that. Strict rules that you can only get married if you're a baptized Christian, because we believe that the Bible is perspicuous enough on this issue that when Paul says do not marry outside the faith, it means do not marry outside the faith. It doesn't mean there's not all these conditions and like distinctions and all that.
Well, do you make any distinctions between Paul's teachings, whether they are perpetually binding or were temporarily binding, like what Paul says about head coverings in 1 Corinthians 11?
Yeah, that is an interesting debate. And of course, I think everyone's kind of been a little bit inconsistent on those things. But generally, unless there's good reason to suspect that they were not perpetually binding, then they are. It's like with the egalitarian complementarian debate, even though I don't love those labels. The question of whether women can be pastors. Like the argument in favor of female pastors is that Paul in 1 Timothy is not making some sort of perpetual argument. But there's the argument against that is he links that to the creation. So it's like in 1 Corinthians, all of Paul's sexual teachings seem to be pretty binding. That's where we get the whole love is patient, love is kind. That's where we get the most explicit condemnation of homosexuality in the Bible. So there's no reason to suspect that the sexual ethics would ever change that Paul is giving in 1 Corinthians. So yes, it's Protestants will always have debate over how to interpret specific things, but generally I believe the Bible is pretty perspicuous on the basics of what a Christian marriage should be and who Christians are to marry.
But would you agree, though, that there are many Protestant Christians, people with a high view of Scripture, that would just say marrying a non-Christian is imprudent, not necessarily sinful?
There might be individuals who say that, but that's not any Protestant traditional understanding that I'm aware of.
Or so do you think the distinction there it's only Christian and non-Christian? There's not like certain, as long as you just have a valid baptism, it doesn't matter if you like one's a Calvinist, one's an Arminian.
Well, no, if they're both true Christians, because we don't say that you need to be part of our denomination to be a true Christian. I never said that. Like, I would say if a Catholic and a Protestant want to get married, there's nothing in Scripture or the Protestant tradition that would forbid that. Just some practical questions of
and what's interesting is that's why.
See, he says that, but it depends on how you define Protestant. I mean, for his point of view, there's only one type of true Christian. So if you're a progressive Christian or a Protestant who doesn't believe in the Eucharist or isn't Trinitarian, I'm pretty sure he would say that's unequally yoked from his point of view. I'm pretty sure Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons are not allowed to marry true Christians in his point of view.
Why the Catholic Church has two different standards. You just need permission to marry a non-Catholic Christian, but you would need a particular dispensation from the bishop to be able to marry a non-Christian. It's called disparity of cult. You would need to be able to do that.
Yeah, and it's like the Catholic Church, for the most part, 99% of the time, I would say they give very good moral teachings, very good moral advice. When someone asks me, what's your political opinion, I basically say, just ask the Catholic Church. It's probably the same as that.
Well, and that's not just for him. There's also a lot of people in Protestantism where what they go back to is they go back to what the Catholic Church has ruled on. This was funny in James White's recent debates. He's calling Tertullian a heretic. Well, Tertullian can only be a heretic if you agree that the Catholic Church's ruling on him is correct. Because he didn't leave Christianity, he left the Catholic Church. I mean, he's the most pre-Protestant of pre-Protestants. And yet, his dissatisfaction with the corruption in the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, which reflects Martin Luther's dissatisfaction with the Catholic Church many, many centuries later, James White and pretty much all apologists are going to consider Tertullian a heretic. So you can't have it both ways. You can't be appealing to the church's authority for your own understandings and be protesting against them at the same time if you're going to say you're not part of the one true Catholic Church. Just something to consider, a little bit to chew on.
But it seems like human wisdom some of the time. It seems like sometimes they're elevating human wisdom over clear teachings from divine wisdom. And the divine wisdom seems to say a pretty absolute claim on Christians need to marry other Christians.
Okay, interesting.
Anyway, so I know there's great Catholic explanations.
Yeah, that's good. It's interesting. I
Yeah.
didn't know you had that view.
So the last thing is like,
Sure.
I think one of the biggest obstacles for Protestants when converting to Catholicism, not that I'm considering it, but for those who are considering, is like the whole praying to saints.
And again, he that face on Trent. Seriously, people always ask me what I'm talking about when I say that he can't hide his emotions. This is not him like angry at this guy. This is him angry at his camera. He cannot hide his disgust or his annoyance at all. He really can't.
Praying to Mary, veneration of icons, whatever. That's something Protestants are not used to, especially in the Reformed tradition. We're very skeptical of all that stuff.
When I went to...
So, like I said, Redeem announced today that he's going to be switching his denomination soon. Anyone in the room, if you guys want to vote on what you think he's going to be switching to, let's have a poll. I made a joke on my Twitter about him, what the odds are on Scientology, Mormonism, and Jehovah's Witness. So yeah, let's have fun with it. All right, let's keep going.
So my wife and I on our honeymoon, we went all over Europe because we're like, look, we're Catholic, we're gonna have kids, probably a bunch of them. If God blesses us, we're not gonna be able to probably travel very much, and so we just went all over Europe for our honeymoon. Just be like, yeah, let's get out there. So we went to Athens and Rome, and we went up to Geneva. So we were in Rome. What I love, and the city of Rome, I'm not a big fan of. Kind of gross in parts.
Yeah.
But the churches they're beautiful. They're astounding. When I got to Geneva in Switzerland. I don't know if you've ever been to Switzerland or Geneva.
Never been off the continent.
Well, you said you're planning to get married?
Yes.
When are you getting married?
It's not official yet, but sometime next year.
Mazel tov. All right. Well, if you
don't know Redeem Zoomer's story, if what he says on Twitter is correct, he's gone from Judaism to atheism or agnosticism to Reformed Christian, and Reform meaning Calvinism. He must have been doing this for a while, because before he became Redeem Zoomer, he was already being featured in some of Jay Dyer's not anti-apologetics. He's an apologist, but his anti-polemics, I guess, whatever he's doing against other Christianities. I guess polemics. And he took on Redeem Zoomer a long time ago for a phone call where they went for like 3 hours, and he then hung up on Redeem Zoomer saying that his phone died. Who knows? And never reached back out to him. Just interesting.
Are able to go anywhere, and especially before you have children, you especially as a Calvinist, I think you'd probably enjoy it. When I went to Switzerland to Geneva, like the town and the countryside is just gorgeous. The Alps, Lake Geneva. Then you go into the churches, and it's just like this empty, big stone cathedral, and like here's Calvin's chair, and it's this little rickety wooden chair.
That's how I like
the
it.
Absolute rickety wooden little thing. And so but the idea of Marian devotion and praise, for example, and art and icons, there will be a little of a disparity with that amongst Protestants. Like Lutherans will be much more opt for that, including for Marian praise and devotion. But you were saying there's the concern about maybe it goes a little too far.
So it's like I understand that there's arguments for praying to Mary, like asking her to pray for us or whatever, or the saints. But my question is, do you think there's
Okay, so I do notice that we are having a little trouble with the stream on StreamYard. If it continues to happen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch it back to Streamlabs just because they have a stronger signal, but the signal's very weak. I have a little indicator over here that the signal is very weak from this broadcast room. Like I said, the StreamYard just has a lot of issues. That's why I don't use it more often. It's like the perfect app if it wasn't for the issues. Said everybody. All right, let's continue. So if Deconverted Man doesn't join within the next, let's say, 15, 20 minutes, I'm going to switch over to Streamlabs. And there's still a way for me and him to communicate through Streamlabs. It's just a little bit more difficult. There's a few more hoops to jump through.
Ever an excess of that in the Catholic Church? Do you think there's ever cases where they focus too much on Mary? Does it ever go too far is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think anything can be abused, whether it's in Catholicism or Protestantism.
Okay.
So I agree with that. To say that there is no abuse when it comes to Marian devotion, that's just false. You have some folk groups who have engaged in syncretism.
So I thought it was completely amazing. I guess a few days ago when I was watching this, that Trent even admitted that Marian devotion can go too far on that level. Obviously, sacrificing to Mary is going too far, but the fact that even the Marian devotions, which much like novenas are on the edge of acceptable Catholic practice, that even those practices can go too far. That's a big admission, which makes me think that he is trying to reach out more. Not only is he having more guests on a one-to-one level, but now I guess he's distancing himself either practically or literally or professionally from Catholic Answers. He's going to have to go out on a limb and have to kind of solder down how much some of his stronger stances from the last few years. So no, I'm very impressed by the amount of grace and amount of charity he's given to his guests so far.
And so they have blended Marian devotion with paganism, which is bad. You have in the early church, you had the Collyridians. They offered sacrifices to Mary of cakes on altars,
and that was condemned.
Epiphanius condemns that. You even have language that makes people uncomfortable. I believe Pope St. John Paul II was even uncomfortable.
So there's a practice in my culture where on the Day of the Dead, on All Saints Day, we'll go to the graves and family members will have meals with the dead. And the line is very simple. It's one thing to have a picnic at the gravesite. It's another thing to offer food or alcohol to the dead person. But a lot of the people will bring food for their dead relative, which is not allowed. So no sacrifices to the dead.
Was some of the things St. Louis de Montfort had in his writings to praise Mary. And although St. Louis de Montfort was very clear, he said, like, look, all this, what I say about Mary is but a mere atom in comparison to the infinite majesty who is God. And so I think that when this happens, so a few thoughts on that. One, so there's going to be some devotions that go across the pale.
Yeah.
Wrong. You shouldn't do that. Offering worship of sacrifice, saying that Mary is the one who saves us from sin rather than Christ. Sometimes when people say, and now this goes to my second thing though about language, because some people say, Mary deliver me, Mary save me. We have to remember the Bible includes things like Paul says to a wife, will you save your husband? Husband, will you save your wife? He doesn't mean like they're literally going to do that.
I know it's a language issue sometimes.
It is. So there's the language issue there. But like a lot of the Marian devotion where people say, I go to Mary rather than Christ, especially in medieval literature or folk literature. One thing that stems from that is a recognition that Mary.
And really the only reason he's bringing this up is because Gavin Ortlund brought this up. This is not something that was even on Catholic radar 5 years ago. So congrats to Gavin Ortlund for pointing something out.
Mary only has the power to lead us to salvation, whereas Christ has the power to save or damn someone. And that can be too far, though, when you become so afraid of the fact that God is a judge, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
There can be an imbalance there. Another element would be,
if you ever tried asking questions to ChatGPT for
Yay. We all love commercials. Everybody say yay for commercials.
a lot of times, well, it'd be like someone if they were judging Calvinism based solely upon the sermons of Jonathan Edwards.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It would be like, all right, let's just back it up a little bit here.
Yeah.
That there's going to be a difference between a highly articulated theology and
I don't like that he's dogging on Jonathan Edwards. Jonathan Edwards has a lot of good Protestant writings. He's not on my list of people to read this year. I have over 150 books to read. I'm still finishing up Tertullian because I got distracted. But I do think the hate toward Jonathan Edwards and Tertullian and Origen, I think all these kind of sort of outsider figures, I think the hate is a little bit extreme. These are all people who are trying to be pious Christians, and they're trying to remain within what they understand as orthodoxy in their times. I mean, there's only so far they can go.
and especially like with Marian devotion, when people give devotion, when a lover speaks of the beloved, they sometimes they say things that are
Yes.
hyperbole or romanticized. That would be an element that I would consider there. So, although I think a similar thing happened amongst Protestants too. So, for example, like let's say people have a very high view of Scripture. Well, there was an interesting episode in the early church of a superstition related to Scripture that in the 4th century, people started wearing these amulets that had biblical manuscript texts in them. And the amulets, of course, were a popular pagan devotion at the time. And people would wear it.
So I do think that it's interesting that I do think it is interesting that he's talking about how this is condemned, because it's actually a practice I was thinking of doing when I was deep into the Old Testament. I couldn't help but be tempted to wear a necklace with the 10 Commandments in it. So, heresy or not, it still seemed pretty cool. All right, so we have a guest. So it's a good thing I didn't turn off the stream. Lisa for Truth, how you doing?
Hey, Alpha.
Hey.
What practice were you talking about? A necklace with the 10 Commandments?
Yeah, so there's a practice in Judaism where you have to put it starts with a T. I can't think of the word right now, but basically on your front door, right above your doorbell, or sometimes on the inside, you have the 10 Commandments in a very small little tin box. You wouldn't even notice it. And as a Jewish person, you can also wear it as a necklace. Some of the Messianic Christians or Messianic Jews will, depending on what side they're on, will also do the same thing. They'll do the Jewish customs, and one of the customs is to always keep the Bible on you. So you want to keep the word on your head and on your heart, and the way they can do that is by wearing a little pendant that has the actual Bible inside of it. The main parts.
I've heard of that as being on your head, but not ever as a necklace.
Yeah, it's I think it's only like $5 to get one from Israel that's blessed. So I was very tempted to do so. I have a bunch of unkosher things that I want to do. I'm ironically calling it unkosher because it's a Jewish practice. But there's like, as a Catholic, you have to be careful when you wear those beads that have blessings from the coexist. You're not supposed to have some that are of religions that are incompatible with Christianity. So you can't have the Taoist or the Islamic symbols on there, or the Buddhist symbols on there. You could have like little saints, but like you can't go all out for coexist. There's this really awesome necklace. I'm not sure if it's pan pride or if it's bisexual pride or whatever, but it's just a cool looking necklace. And like, as a Catholic, I just can't wear that on stream, but it looks awesome. Like, I'm like, I don't care what it stands for. It's like just one of the most awesome necklaces I've ever seen. and you can't do it. I have some Taoist stuff from when I was a Taoist that's just art, but I can't wear it on stream to promote it because I do talk Catholicism here. It's kind of a weird rule in the Catholic world where once you start talking about Catholic stuff, you kind of can't do certain. That's why I have alternate channels where I can talk about things more openly, even though I rarely use those channels. Like I want to talk about X-Men on one of them. So what's going on with you, Lisa? Oh,
Not
here we go.
much.
Thomas gave us the word. It's phylactery. They're phylacteries. So anyway, continue.
Not much. I've been having a lot of headaches. My neurologist that follows me for epilepsy, she said it's probably due to my cataracts. And you're probably thinking, why on earth would cataracts have anything to do with headaches? And it has to do with eye strain.
Yeah, retinal migraines. You can actually go blind from those. I had one in my 20s, and I have a little piece of dead eye, like a little part of my eye that's just dead. That's never gonna. Of course, your brain counteracts for that, so you don't know that you're blind in part of your eye. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have 2 blind spots, one in each eye.
So
That's just a thing that we have, but we don't know that we have it.
So by any chance,
one because each eye has a different kind of a blind spot. So we have a smaller blind spot. Okay, so each eye has a blind spot because at the very back of our eye, our eyes have rods and cones, which is how we see, basically. How it's projected to the brain, I should say. Okay, so at the very back of the eye, we have our optic nerve, which leads to the brain. Well, because that optic nerve is there are no rods and cones, which is why there's a blind spot.
So Lisa, if you don't mind me interrupting just a little bit, did you by any chance come in for either Redeem Zoomer or for my rebuttal of Deconverted Man?
What is this? What are you responding to?
So I'm currently watching the very end of. I've been doing for the last 2 months a nightly watch along, where we're just watching one particular one particular apologetic, and we're watching it all the way through beginning to end, and I'm critiquing it as we go. Some of them have been popular, some of them haven't. And then the other thing that I've been doing is I've been doing shorter uploads instead of the 1 hour videos that weren't doing very well. I'm now doing shorter and shorter ones. And I tried out a 30-second one recently, not a short, a video, where I did a glacier of belief. And me and Deconverted Man, our friend, has been arguing with me for the last 2 days. So I put a challenge in my chat, both on my community tab and in the video, for him to come by tonight, so we can have ourselves a little debate on whether or not my view is correct or not. So I was wondering if you were here for either reason.
I'm actually here for your. I didn't know you were doing Deconverted Man tonight. But
I don't even.
Sounds interesting because he and I are friends too. Internet friends.
To be fair, I don't even know if he's going to show up. I challenged him this afternoon. I told him that I was going to be doing my nightly videos. He's stopped by before, so I'm hoping he'll show up. If he doesn't, it's totally fine. But I'll make fun of him in the chat for it, just because I love him.
So about the necklace thing, like your Taoist beads, right? Like, I don't know anything about Catholicism, so I'm not trying to offend you with any of my questions or anything. But Can you like pray the rosary with like Taoist beads?
Technically speaking, the Buddhist beads. I'm not talking about the Taoist ones though, but the Buddhist beads, the Orthodox beads, and the Catholic beads have roughly the same amount of beads. There are slight differences,
Okay.
but the tradition of praying 3 to 5 times a day is not a Catholic tradition. It's an Eastern tradition. So Judaism, Taoist, a lot of these cultures have these prayer times. So they're at the same time, and they're the same amount of prayers. So for Catholics and for Orthodox and for Jewish people, we read the same prayers. We read the Psalms, and we read them in roughly the same order. Now, the Jewish people do them daily. For Catholics, we do it over a week, although it used to be a daily thing. We used to have the exact same pattern. And we do it out of a book that's called the Breviary. But we have other books like the Liturgy of the Hours where we expand it. And
Okay.
it's called the Official Prayer of the Church. So technically, you're not doing anything wrong because you're just using beads. They're just beads. We don't believe that
Mhm.
there's other gods. So you're technically not doing anything wrong. But if it had a Buddhist or a Taoist symbol on it, like if it had the yin yang instead of the cross, it would be a problem. You get what I'm saying?
Okay. Yeah.
But
You
it is
you
possible to so if you go to China or if you go to Japan, you will see Catholic priests that have a cross and the yin yang on it because they're representing the one true way. And the yin yang in Taoism is about the one true way. So there's a
mhm.
little bit of bleed over, but culturally it would cause scandal if you're here in the US because most people don't know that distinction.
Okay. You know what would be a cool stream for you to do?
Hmm.
Um Praying the rosary. I think that would be a cool thing for you to do.
So I was actually in Gavin Ortland's chat earlier today because I did the very first video on Mindshift. Mindshift used to be a very different guy who I followed back when he was more. This is back in the shitposting day. And now he's come back as a different persona, but his attitude hasn't changed much. And I did the very first video on him, and then his channel took off. So now Trent Horn and Gavin Ortland have. I think Trent Horn actually interviewed him on his stream, and Gavin Ortland has his videos up that he's responding to in his latest video on slavery. And I'm like, I've been doing this for 7 years. I'm in your guys' chats. You guys know my name. Literally, Dr. Kip and what's his name, Dan McKellen have stopped responding to my questions in their chats. I'm gonna have to do super chats to get their attention.
Mm.
um like I'm there, I'm present, and Mindshift, who's a brand new channel, gets a shout out, and I was just like, I gotta reevaluate my life if I can't even get on with my allies.
You know, Dr. Kip is the only one I recognize
Well,
out of all of
Dr.
those names.
So Dr. Kip watched one of my videos, one of my watch alongs. And again, it could be a fake account. I don't know. There's tons of sock accounts out there, but let's assume it's really him. He didn't like the way that I interpreted the Bible. To be fair, he doesn't like the way any apologist interprets the Bible, so it's fine. But it's just kind of like if I'm pissing off all sides, either I'm right or I'm the one that's the most wrong. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, not necessarily. How
Hmm.
you interpret the Bible is just your interpretation, right?
Well, that's what Dan McCullen says, but that's not what most other people think. Most people think there's a right and wrong way. You know how that goes. But we're starting to lose audience here, so let's get back to the video. Lisa, if you have any
Sorry.
comments on, no, it's good. If you have any comments on the video, feel free to make them. Don't leave. Just let me know when you want to say something, and I'll pause it. Okay.
Sure.
They would take the amulets and empty out the pagan stuff, and they would put in.
And Lisa, we've been friends for a long time. You don't have to apologize. You're always welcome on my stream.
Thanks.
A little like John 3:16, no, probably not John 3:16. That wasn't heavily cited in the early church, but something a verse and for protection, and so just St. John Chrysostom had to say, you know what, I don't think amulets are a great idea here. This is, we should love the scripture and the word, but it becomes a kind of superstition. Though he even said,
so at least I don't know if you know this, but they basically, the Bible itself is against superstition, which is funny because one of the accusations most Protestants have is that the Bible is superstitious. So I don't know if you saw the most recent episode of Myth Vision, where they had a guy talking about imagination as it relates to God, and how acknowledging that takes away one of the biggest ammunitions anti-theists have against theists. What do you think about that?
I haven't caught up with my Myth Vision. I've got a lot of stuff in my watch later list. So, but can you repeat
Are you like me?
that?
I have almost 5,000. I have almost 5,000 videos in my watch later. So yeah. No. So basically, one of the things that atheists love to do is they love to talk against the Sky Daddy. So what a secular, I guess, atheistic scholar did is he pointed out how imagination isn't the same as fiction, and how it's a process of the mind. And so that takes away the ability to use that as a condemnation of religiosity.
Okay. Well, I would have to say, I mean, his definition of fiction and his definition of imagination to say anything about that. But I will say, there's quite a brain explanation for religion. That's why it developed,
Well, there's an argument that religion is evolutionary, and it
Correct.
helps.
It is.
Yeah,
It is.
but that doesn't negate the idea of there being a God, and so that's kind of what
No, it doesn't.
and that's what this. And again, this is a atheistic scholar who's saying we should stop using this argument because we don't say chairs, and he's not making this argument. I'm just using this as a simplified version. We don't say that chairs and desks aren't real because we can imagine what a chest or a desk is. Just because it can exist in our imagination doesn't mean that there isn't some reality to it.
Right.
No, well, anyway, I'm going to go ahead and okay.
Are you one of the Catholics that accept evolution?
Almost all Catholics accept evolution, except for the rad-trads. And there's some push in Orthodox Catholicism, which is Eastern Orthodoxy, because we're all Catholic, it's kind of a complicated thing. But there's a push to declare the rad-trads as heretics, which the Catholic Church hasn't done, but our other half, the Orthodox Church, there's a movement in them to declare Orthodox rad-trads heretics.
Okay. One more question, and then we'll get back to it.
Okay.
When you say Orthodox, are you rolling in like Russian Orthodox, Romanian Orthodox?
So, generally speaking, when you talk Catholic and Orthodox, what you're really talking about is Greek Orthodox and Latin Roman Rite Catholic. It's complicated. Roman Rite is the largest rite in the Roman Catholic Church, so that's why we call it Roman. But it's also only a rite. But it's the Latin Church or the Western Catholic Church. The reason we don't use Western Catholic Church is because there's an American group that calls themselves the Western Catholic Church. So it would just get too confusing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. But that's what it is. So Orthodoxy is basically Greek Orthodox, and then all of Orthodoxy, which includes the Patriarch of Jerusalem. But the Patriarch of Jerusalem is claimed by everybody, because no Christian in their right mind is gonna not claim the home of Jesus Christ. So, all right, we're hit play.
That someone who keeps a copy of the Gospels in their home is sure to drive demons away from their home. And so it's like, even something as good as the Bible, you could.
And for my audience, that's something that's very interesting. So we have the little statues of Joseph that are sold at most Catholic churches, and these are supposed to help you sell a house. How that is not a heretical practice, um, or at least some form of idol worship, is beyond me, because that's straight up magic, and that's not allowed by the church. Yet the church buildings are willing to sell these items to make money. So, that's not a good practice.
Take it and become superstitious.
Did he say no demon is allowed to enter a house that has the Gospels?
So what they're talking, he's talking against superstition. So so with rad trads again, which is acceptable in Catholicism, though on the edge of acceptability, going way back to early heresies, they believe the Bible is magical. This is why a lot of Protestantism is condemned by Orthodoxy. If you watch Jay Dyer at all, you'll hear him go off on Protestants worshiping the Bible. And that's kind of what's being talked about here. People mistakenly put superstitious and magical abilities, I guess it would be the right word, in religious items. And you're not supposed to do that. It's actually a heresy. It's actually frowned upon and wrong to do. The only magic, if you want to call it that, is God. Like the only spiritual, the only true universal absolute is God. So anything else magical isn't real. It's either a demon fooling you, or it's simply you're being crazy. And this goes back to the earliest church fathers.
Okay. Again, not trying to be offensive or anything, because, like I said, I don't really have much of a grasp on Catholicism. So when I ask you things, I'm not trying to
Just ask.
offend you or anything like that. You know me. You know, if I want to be offensive, I can be offensive. You know. But what about stuff like holy water? I mean, I know that's not viewed as magical, but
so first off, you have to separate out all the movies and TV shows and vampire films and ghost films and throw that out, because that's not what holy water is.
Okay.
Holy water is just blessed water. So the difference between blessed bread and blessed wine in the Eucharist is immense. So anybody can bless wine or bless bread. Anybody. You don't even have to be religious. You just have to ask God to bless it. You can bless anything. You can bless a sinner. You can bless a rock. You can bless anything. All it is asking for God's guidance or God's goodness to be expressed through this item or this person. That's it. When it comes to the Eucharist, there's an actual action that's happening. Catholics call it transubstantiation, but Orthodox have a different name for it. Calvinists and Anglicans have a different name for it. But what's happening to the bread is not magic. You're not going to go and look under a microscope and see the bread be human flesh. You're not going to see the wine be physical blood. Okay, so it's not just symbolic, it's both and. It's both a symbol and an actuality. We're saying the actual essence of God is in the bread, but that's not blessing the bread. Blessing the bread is something anybody can do. only the priest, only someone with sacramental orders from Christ can do a miracle, basically, which is to bring God's presence directly inside of you. And as the further you get into it, the further you get into allegory and metaphor, and it's really hard for most non-theologians to separate out the metaphor from the actuality from the spiritual, put it that way. And so people just think it's nonsense when they're not religious. And so what gets even more complicated is when you're talking about the Bible and inspiration, because it's the same thing. It's the Holy Spirit working through a person. Just like a scientist can never prove the Eucharist or God, for that matter, a scholar can never prove that the Holy Spirit was inspiring the entire Bible from the very first page that was ever written about it all the way to the very last printing that ever happened of the Bible, as of like an hour ago. So no one can prove that in a scientific manner. So it becomes a dividing line between faith and what's physically in front of you. But just understand that when it's a blessing, it's not talking about anything like that. So holy water is not magical water that throws out demons. There are rad trads who believe that, but the holy water is just a blessing. It's a way to remind you of your baptism. It's a way to remind you of your commitment to God. And it's a way to symbolize washing your hands before walking into the church, just like how Jewish people would have to go through some water before entering the synagogue back in the olden times. And that's kind of what John the Baptist was doing with his baptisms. He was taking this action, which women have to do once a month and men have to do, I don't know how often. He's taking this action and he's taking it away from this once a time ritual to a once only ritual. So the holy water is like symbolizing that origin, but it's a symbol that has efficacious properties to it.
Gotcha. Thank
Did
you.
that make sense? Did that make sense? I don't. I know I talked a little bit too long for that, but did that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So not magic, symbolic, but with efficacious properties.
Well, yeah.
So I would agree with you on that when it comes to Marian devotion and the intercession of the saints. That's why I think it's very important, like the magisterium, the teaching of the church, for example, the phrase prayer to the saints, actually, I'm not aware of it in a magisterial document. It typically includes things like seeking the intercession of the saints.
Lisa, do you know what the magisterium is?
No.
Okay, so the magisterium is all the bishops and the pope combined together to create what's called the teaching office of the church. Technically speaking, in a very small way, the local priest, and then even in a smaller way, your parents are part of the magisterium because it's the teaching office of the church. It's the official teaching. And because the church is so broad, you need guides. So that's where the catechisms come in. The catechisms are not official teachings, even though people treat it like it is. They're handbooks to say what the consensus is currently for certain questions. So, who's God? Who's Jesus? What's the Bible? All those kind of questions. What do I do if I get pregnant? Those kind of generic answers that you need to give are going to be basically not blessed, but blessed is probably the right word. Is going to be condoned by the Catholic magisterium. That's the teaching office. So that's the Pope and his main cardinals, and then the bishops, and they all kind of get together and they decide things. And it's through consensus of the entire church, including the church militant, the lay people. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Did you get that?
Yeah. Aren't if someone converts to
Catholicism.
Yeah, I had a friend convert to Catholicism when she was like over 50, and she
Mhm.
had to go through classes. Is that
Yes.
like catechism?
Yeah, that's catechism. And the catechism, when you're going through that, you're learning the basic standards of the magisterial rulings. So you're going to learn the basics of Catholicism. They don't want you to go and become an apologist right after you get out of catechism, though. They want you to have read the Bible. They want you to have been practicing for a while, so you don't get the little facts of the faith wrong. So that's kind of what the magisterium is there for. It's the teaching branch of the church. But if you go back even 30 years, their outreach was very limited to what the priest said. So you had to rely much more on the parents. Now with the internet, you can go directly to what the Pope is saying, which causes controversy because what someone's parents said or what someone's sponsor said, the church meant, and then what the Pope is saying or what the bishops are saying, the church means, is different. So you have apostolates, which are groups not that are not official church teachers, and they have the apostolates have apologists. That's what this guy is. And so for many years now, the apologists were the voice of the church because people couldn't hear the Pope every day outside of watching EWTN. Now with the internet, these guys are not as necessary, but now there's so many of them. You go to Twitter, you go to TikTok, you go to YouTube. There's so many people speaking for the church um, that it gets kind of clouded, and you start thinking that these guys' opinions are the rules of the church, but they're not. The magisterium is the only group that can rule on the church, and it has to be done through an ecumenical council to change anything. So it's very it's the church moves even slower than government, put it that way.
So, just to be clear, the ecumenical council, is that
Mhm.
the
That
people, like when the Pope dies and people converge on the Vatican to elect a new Pope, is that the ecumenical council?
no, no. So that would be the cardinals. That'd be the conference of cardinals. Um, so we have a conference of cardinals here in the United States. We have the top guys. The kind of like the it's a group of bishops that kind of are in charge of the United States. They're in charge of a sea, basically. They're in charge of different
Okay.
nations. So every nation has a different group that's in charge of them. Uh, Out of them, there's like one or two people who are stationed in the Vatican. So the Vatican has what's called a nuncio, who will go and kind of go back and forth between uh, different countries and the Pope to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Again, pre-internet, pre-television, pre-telephone, right? Uh, so it's kind of trying to keep everybody on the same page. What an ecumenical council is that sometimes there's an issue that the Bible hasn't answered, and people are now confused about what's going on. So, is Jesus holy man or is Jesus holy God? And there's a split in the church about to happen. So, the Pope or whoever's in charge, so far it's always been the Pope, will call a meeting and everybody will get together. All the heads of each, I mean, you have to be invited and you have to show up, but it's basically the heads of each area, of each region will get together and they'll argue it out. And then whatever's decided at the end of this conference will be the official ruling on this particular issue. Sometimes there's only one issue, sometimes there's many issues. There's only 7 ecumenical councils that everybody agrees with. Then there's the Lateran councils, which is just the Latin councils. And then there's Vatican I and Vatican II, and also the Council of Trent, which are, let's just say the further we get to modern day, the more controversial each ecumenical council is. But the ones that everybody agrees with, the ones that the church is whole, that the Eastern and the Western church are one church, pretty much everyone consents to those, which is the first 7.
I'm sorry to ask all these questions, but like I said, I don't know much about Catholicism.
No, that's okay. Just understand that when you hear Protestant apologists arguing about dogma and arguing about doctrine,
Mhm.
and you're like, and they will tell you it's in the Bible, but you're like, where's that in the Bible?
Mhm.
That's what they're arguing about. They're arguing about things that the Catholic Church has ruled on that they also believe, but because they can't say we believe it because of the Catholic Church, they have to find a way to say it's present in the Bible, even though it's not.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Saints or invoking the saints. Invoking
Right.
isn't the best word either, but I would prefer to use language like seeking their intercession,
Right.
which I would say goes back
I'm going to turn
very
on my fan. I'll
far
be right
in the
back.
church's history. That you have ante-Nicene writers like Methodius speaking of Mary in this way. You have Hippolytus, I think, when he writes about the 3 men in the furnace in the Old Testament, he has another remark after that asking them to pray for him. And then there is a early liturgical prayer called the Subtuum Presidium that says, "O Theotokos, we fly to thee for thy protection." Though I've been doing more
Lisa, you don't have to speak on this one, but just to let you know, Theotokos is the mother of God. That's going to be the Virgin Mary.
Why do Catholics? Okay,
Ask.
I don't. This may be totally. I may have this totally wrong, but why do you guys pray to Mary?
So, technically speaking, we don't pray to her; we pray through her. That's kind of the old apologist line.
Okay.
But more functionally, you can pray to any saint, and I'm using quotation marks for "to."
Okay.
Any saint you can pray to because they're closer to God than you. And
Okay.
so the prayers of a holy man are more efficacious than the prayers of a non-holy man. So the most holy person you can think of is the Virgin Mary. So since she's the mother of God, since she's the mother of Jesus Christ, since she's the one who got Jesus to perform his first miracle, since she's the one who started everything, since it's her fiat, which fiat just means her yes, that starts this whole process, we pray through the Virgin Mary to Jesus Christ for Jesus to pray to his Father. That's what we're doing. You don't have to do it that way. You can pray directly to Jesus. You can pray directly to the Holy Spirit. You can pray directly to God. You can pray to the Trinity itself. But in the Catholic Church, because the metaphor, which is the typology for the church, is the ark, and the ark is represented in the New Testament typologically through the Virgin Mary. So these are all typological arguments, which is something that for some reason a lot of secular scholars don't seem to understand typology, even though they themselves are the ones who translated the books that we read in English that talks about typology. But whatever. It's the typological explanation. So Mary represents the church. So when we're praying to the Virgin Mary, we're praying through the church to her son, Jesus.
And I know that you know that I try my best not to be offensive, and I really appreciate you not taking offense because I really don't mean it that way.
No, and even if you were being offensive, I don't mind. I'm totally okay with that. But you're being very gentle and very nice. Don't worry about it. Ask the questions you want to ask. I'm going to go ahead and hit play, though, so I can finish this video tonight. Okay?
research on that. I used to speak more confidently about that. There's a little bit of a dating issue there.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
There's and it's important when we put forward evidence, we always got to have our cards on the table.
Yeah.
And I wasn't aware of the dating issue because I had read secular sources on the Subtuum Presidium that put it in the 3rd century, not Catholic apologists.
Yeah.
So I read the secular sources and think, oh yeah, it looks like Oxford Press or whatever.
Yeah.
But then I came across other research. It's in German. So it's like, oh, okay. Google Translate and figure this out. Like some people date it more to the 6th or 7th century, but there is still a heavy leaning towards ante-Nicene.
Yeah.
So this is one of the questions that came up recently on myth vision versus inspiring philosophy. And it's something I've been asking because I rely heavily on the church fathers. And just like with the Pauline letters or pseudo-Pauline and pseudo-Peter, I often wonder how much of what I read in the church fathers is actually written by the church fathers and not by a later scribe who is trying to preserve the text, and how much of it is pseudo whoever, pseudo Origen, pseudo Tertullian. That's always something that I worry about.
But I do think that when you look at, there is also imagery of Mary and saints in very early house churches, like Dura Europa, for example, like the earliest house church we've ever uncovered.
Yeah, there's the question of when did those images get there? Even if the church is old, how old are the images?
Sure, but I still think even if they're older than the church, I don't think people have placed them much older, for example. But yeah, I think you bring up a fair point, and that's why we look to the magisterium for guidance, where you would basically have absolutely inappropriate devotion or language, absolutely appropriate because the church uses it, and then private devotions where people are going to have different levels of personal comfort or discomfort.
Right.
And no one is bound to any particular kind of private devotion.
Right. And I would agree that it's possible to idolize the Bible. Some Protestants do idolize the Bible. Some Protestants would say the Bible is fundamentally what they have faith in. They have faith in Jesus because the Bible talks about him.
Yeah.
John Calvin said the human heart is a perpetual factory of idols. It's impossible to idolize literally anything that's not God.
Yeah.
Even things.
Lisa, was that your experience in the Protestant church, that they were worshiping the Bible and not God?
Well, it seemed to me like they would put the Bible on higher ground than God sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes.
Did you watch Satan's Guide to the Bible?
I watched part of it.
What did you think?
Oh, I enjoyed it.
But did it ring true for you? Not just in enjoyment, but like, was what he's saying your experience in the Protestant church? Because like I said, as a Catholic,
Oh yeah,
I was never told any of that stuff was literal. I was never told any of the, not that a priest could never lie. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I personally was never told any of the lies. So for me, when I came across those things in my learning, it didn't hurt my faith. It made me believe more.
yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, it depends on which part of Protestant it. Yeah.
Well, just your experience. From your experience, was it true for you?
Yeah. The earth, God literally created the earth in 6 days, is what I grew up with. The earth is 6,000 years old, even though the Bible never says how old the earth is. Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm. Now,
isn't it interesting that the Bible never says how old the earth is?
Well, let me ask you though, do you think that as some of the people on Myth Vision, I call them the Dark Magisterium, as some of the people on Myth Vision seem to allude to, and as the video seems to make heavy claim to, or direct claim, explicit claim to, do you think that it's intentional misleading? Or do you think it's just a difference in belief?
The people,
The pastor.
it depends. Like my parents, no. I don't believe they intentionally misled me. The people who went to seminary, absolutely. Absolutely. But
what do you think? What do you think the consequences for that should be? So, in Christianity in general, if they knowingly misled you, their punishment is hell. I just want to be very clear. Like, lying in the name of God is the worst thing you can do. But let's say that they're not lying in the name of God. They really do think they're correct. Do you think there should be consequences for them misleading that many people in a false direction?
Okay, well, let's think of this as a court case, right?
Okay.
Say somebody kills someone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not always murder, you know. There's also manslaughter. And
Lisa, if you're still there, we lost you. I'm going to go ahead and hit play until you come back in, okay?
Things relating to God.
Sure.
People idolize their own church and theology debates.
Yeah.
So
It's about keeping it in its proper perspective.
I'm
I mean,
sorry.
the sin of idolatry is
Okay,
just
you're
when
back?
you.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a slightly different question, okay?
Sure.
On the same topic, but so let's say it's fraud. They're getting you to donate money. Let's go ahead and just put that out there. Okay, so they're committing fraud. They know that they're lying to you, and their
They should
income
pay
is
every
more
penny
important
back.
than your truth. Okay. Do you feel like you've been personally harmed by these kind of preachers? Like you personally?
Yeah. I've
And
had to contend with like the health thing,
Mhm.
you know, like when I was deconverting,
Mhm.
that was one thing that kept me in the religion longer than or not really kept me in, but more like kept me from questioning it, you know?
But okay, so do you think that it's the concept of hell, which could be real or not real? There's no way to prove that. I believe it is real, you believe it's not. Or do you think it's their interpretation of hell as being, as it can only be torture, it can only be damnation? There's no other way to interpret hell but that, and the one way ticket to hell is to not follow our rules. There's no exception. Do you think it's their understanding of hell that was damaging to you, or just the concept of hell by itself, no matter how you slice and dice it?
Their concept of hell. Like in Mormonism, there's a concept of outer darkness, but
Mhm.
outer darkness is not like torture hell. It's just you don't want to be in the presence of God, so you're just not in the presence of God. You
So
know, it's not.
the whole torture thing comes from the two lines where there's going to be gnashing and welling of teeth.
Mhm.
That's it. That's where we get all the idea. So everything that comes after that, whether it's correct or not correct, is not from the Bible. So in the
Right.
Bible, you're just getting you're going to be tossed out into the outer darkness where there's going to be welling and gnashing of teeth. We don't know why they're welling. They could be welling because they're sorrowful for not being with God. We don't know why there's gnashing of teeth. It could be embarrassment or humility. There's different ways to interpret what the cause of those two reactions are.
Mhm.
So, do you think that, let's say that you and I, you haven't said this, but I'm just kind of going with what you were saying. Let's say you received psychological damage from their interpretation. Do you
Mhm.
think that these kind of churches, that the fire and brimstone type churches, should be on the bill for your, like, let's say you decided to go get therapy for this, should they have to pay that for the people that they've damaged psychologically?
No,
Okay.
because generally, if you're going for psychological help, there's a lot more than just a health thing going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying this for all people. I'm just saying in general, you know. But in way of like, there's a huge price to pay for this
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuff. And I'm not just talking individually or, you know, physically or psychologically. I'm talking about culturally, socially. Look at the mess we're in right now. Because I, I am not calling you an idiot, okay? But we've got idiots in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
that take this shit. Sorry to curse on your stream.
It's
Sorry.
fine.
And want to govern by the principles set out in the Bible.
Well, okay, but see, okay, so let me pause you there, and I don't want too much pushback because I do want to finish the video tonight, but I do want a little bit of pushback. Okay, so I have over 1,000 subscribers. Most of my subscribers are atheists. Very few of them are Christians. There's maybe like I've only in the last 2 months have I started getting Christian subscribers to my channel. So before that, it was all Muslims and all atheists. I'm welcome on your channels. I'm welcome in your homes. I'm married to an atheist. I'm living a Christian lifestyle. Have no two ways. No, like one of the things that a lot of Christians who don't like me don't get. I'm 100% living a Christian lifestyle. I'm praying 5 times a day. I quit my job for partially religious reasons. I preach to you all who are my friends when you guys ask. Now, mind you, I don't do this when we're hanging out, and I don't do this when we're like on a different channel and we're talking about, let's say samurai shampoo or blue-eyed samurai. But when we're talking religion, I am talking religion, like I am talking positively about it. But none of you would kick me out of your chats. None of you all, think that I'm being hateful or anything like that. So
Of course not.
so is the problem not so much that they're trying to and I'm thinking this out as we're talking, is the problem not so much that they're trying to legislate based on Christian principles, but the fact that to you, meaning not just you, but like to atheists and to people of other faiths, that they're trying to use the rules and the principles that everybody can kind of agree upon as a way to legislate religiously or morally what's right and wrong instead of what legally is right and wrong.
Well, see, that's the problem. Our country, and I assume you're American. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's okay. Our country constitutionally separates church and state. I don't care what Lauren Boebert says.
Okay, I'm gonna leave it there just for the sake of time, but I do also have pushback for that as well. But I'm gonna keep it there. Yeah, it's a good comment, and we're gonna try to finish out the video. Okay.
Give honor due to the creator to a creature.
Right.
So that's what always has to be remembered. Though it is important, we always want to have, we don't want the extremes of honor where it is not allowed, but also the other extreme of failure to give honor where it's due. And so that's where, like, I've been on social media saying, well, what honor does Mary deserve in virtue of being the mother of God, in virtue of being the first Christian? And so sometimes I've seen either Catholics go too far in giving praise, and then other Protestants who, well, just like, she's just a vessel. I'm like,
Well, No, that's
okay.
well, I'm sure you already know this, but
Mhm.
all the reformers had a very high
They have a
Mariology.
very high Mary.
Heinrich Bullinger believed in like the bodily assumption,
Yeah.
and most of them believed in the perpetual virginity, all that.
Oh yeah, most the reformers' Mariology would be anathema to many evangelicals and other
I know I've had
Protestants
arguments about this.
yes.
Many evangelicals don't like Theotokos, but I'm not really worried about them.
Oh, we're doing okay. We're low battery, but we'll survive.
All
I
right.
also had a problem I had. We can make it. We can make it,
Okay.
people.
So is there any final questions you have for me?
No, this is a good talk. All I'll say
Yes.
is this: I'm very impressed with your work as an apologist, especially
thank
engaging
you.
atheists and others. I've been long.
Okay. So basically, the rest of that is just going to be a diss on me because everything that he's about to say has nothing to do with what I do on my channel. So, Lisa, before you get off, I was very much hoping that one deconverted man was going to show up. He is not here, but I would like to still, so that way my channel isn't my title isn't just clickbait. I would like to go through his arguments against me. Would you like to be playing the role of deconverted man?
Sure. I don't know how well I will do, but sure.
Okay, so I'm going to read his comment. I'm going to then read my response. And then after each time I read his comment, I want you to elaborate on whatever he's saying. We'll try to keep it to about a minute or 2 minutes because most of this conversation has already happened. But just so you can give a little bit of perspective. And then at the very end, instead of me talking, I would like you to kind of give a summary of where you think I'm wrong. Sound good?
Sure.
Okay. So, oops, where'd they go? There we go. Okay. So the video is actually, you know what? We should do that. We should go to the video. That would make sense. If only I had a brain. Let's watch the video first so you can hear what I'm saying. And then from there, we can go through Deconverted Man's comments. Oh, this is so meta, it's scary.
The Bible is inspired truth. The Exodus happened. There was a great flood. People did migrate in and out of Egypt. Mesopotamia did flood. The Bible is a polemic against false truths. One of these groups might have been Semitic. Flood stories exist. These stories are countering other culture stories of the same events. The Bible contains and preserves factuals and truths in narrative forms. The polemic is based on a myth that is based on a true event. Semitic people were in Egypt. There was a local flood. The Bible teaches moral truths. The Bible is inspired truth. The Exodus happened.
Okay, so let's go to over here. You shall be playing the part of one deconverted man. I'm going to read the first comment he made because it's a little long, but then after that, you're welcome to it. Okay.
Okay. Alpha.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about this, but you're gonna have to read his comments because of my cataracts.
Okay, that's not a problem.
Thank you.
So
I'm sorry to be such a bother.
No, it's good. All right, so I will try to act. Deconverted man from Bart Ehrman's blog post this matter. According to Exodus, there are about 600,000 men among the Israelites who escaped from Egypt. Numbers gives a more precise account. I don't know how Deconverted Man talks. I'm going to stop doing that. Men who were 20 years old or 20 years or older and able to serve as soldiers, not counting the Levites. Second, how do we explain this kind of are we to believe that Israel had over 600,000 men or 600,000 people? How do we explain this kind of population growth? If one counts all women, surely as many as men, and all the children, who would presumably be at least as many as the men and women combined, there must have been 2.5 or 3 million people. Now, according to Exodus 1:5, the clan of Jacob started at 70 persons. Okay, that's getting really boring, Deconverted Man. How could the great grandchildren of 12 sons in Jacob number well over 2 million? In addition, even though the demographic statistics for any place in antiquity are noteworthily difficult to obtain, the guesses indicate the entire population. Okay. Just some questions to ponder. Maybe it was way less people. So the story is a myth, at least in part. But how many people then? So, no worldwide flood. We know that didn't happen. Okay. So, what is your response? What do you think about what Deconverted Man said? And add your own opinion to his opinion, please.
Sure. Yeah, we don't know it was 600,000. Well, let me say we know the Exodus never happened. It just didn't. The Israelites were never slaves in Egypt, at least not en masse, as the Exodus claims. There was slavery in the old times. Few Israelites could have been slaves. I don't have a problem saying that, but they weren't slaves en masse, As for the 600,000 men, there was no kind of census, especially if they were like slaves, you know. Why would there be a census of slaves?
Mhm.
It just seems to me this was just just a way of saying there were a lot of Israelites, you know.
Okay, so then let me go ahead and give my response to his. Okay. So go back and watch my claims, or better yet, remember every conversation we have had. I think it could be as low as 600 men or as high as 6,000. I've said before, this part of the Bible is polemic and most likely a composite of different real world and mythic events, even if we take your view that it is pure fiction, which I don't agree with. You can't deny the layering so that it is preserving the social or oral memory of several cultures which could have coalesced into the narrative that survives in the biblical text. I'm speaking here only on the Exodus story for this point, only on the part that has to do with the Exodus from Egypt. You could easily argue that with the timeline, Moses could be a family or a clan, that left the city after a murder, and whose grandson came back to free or lead the Hyksos or the Semites or the Israelites. And it could even be a composite of multiple small, unnoteworthy events or events lost to time. Not to forget that this story was written after the Babylonian exile and was probably written during their return to Israel. So the story probably better reflects their experiences of Neo-Assyria or Neo-Babylon than actually than any actual cultural memory of the events in Egypt. So before we hear Deconverted Man's response, what do you think about that?
I'm glad you mentioned the Hyksos because they most assuredly did exist,
Mm-hmm.
which some scholars say is the basis for the early Israelite myth.
So
But
I have an interesting theory that has come to my mind more recently. This is not a theory I've had for a very long time. But the more I read about the ancient Semites, the more I read about the ancient Hyksos, and the more I read about the ancient Israelites, I think it's possible they could be three different groups from three different areas and three different points in time that coalesce into one population. So whether you want to call them cousins or whatever, it doesn't matter to me. So you can have a group that comes out of Canaan. You can have a group that was migrating from Babylon or Assyria or wherever. You can have a group coming from Hethia, and you can have a group coming out of Egypt. And Egypt doesn't have to mean Egypt, because the story is being told after Egypt was established. So it can be any form of Egypt. It doesn't have to be the pyramids. It could be anything. It could be just in that area. So I think that it's more than possible that we're getting multiple oral traditions from different communities that eventually become the one community of Israelites. And it's just being composited together, and it's reflecting the new reality of coming out of Babylon. And so that's influencing the way that they're recording the story. That's a completely new theory of mine. That's not a theory that I've had for a very long time. It's less than a few months old, but I think that could be a possibility.
It could. We don't really have, from the Egyptian side, yes, we have a lot
We have
of
both we have the Hyksos and we have the Israelites from the Egyptian side, because we have the Israelites among the sea people, and we have the Hyksos among the ancient Semitic rulers, temporary rulers of one town or one section of ancient Egypt. So we have two, but they're centuries apart. One's in the early, I think, 1515s, and then the other one's closer to the 800s. So they're centuries apart, but the story and the names line up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do not offhand recall the dates of the Hyksos and the Sea Peoples, but yeah.
All right, now I'm going to go ahead and read Deconverted Man's answer. And again, you're going to play the part of Deconverted Man and expound upon it, okay? If it's so buried under so much myth, then how could we know what was ever real about any of it? I do note you're not addressing my other challenge. Lisa, for Deconverted Man, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I tend to believe what is backed up by archaeology. So, in other words, we know the Sea Peoples existed because of archaeology. We know the Hyksos existed because of archaeology. As for anything else, I'm not going to say one way or another that it's, I'm going to believe what the archaeology says, and that's all I'm going to believe. But let's just say that's all we can prove.
Okay. All right, so here's how I respond. The city of Troy in the Trojan War is buried under so much myth, yet still a real city and a real event, even if we thought it was myth for so many years. And I feel like you don't have a very healthy memory. Again, I am not an ultra literalist. I view the Bible as literature first, then as philosophy, then theology, then history. We have had these conversations. It was a local flood, and it could even be a memory of several floods. Most likely a family tale after a great flood, and a bit of confusion from the modern Protestant and atheist audience about hyperbole. As from the storyteller's or character's perspective, the whole world did flood, because there was water as far as he could see. Like what happened when Houston flooded a few years ago. Even from a helicopter with a modern camera, the lens couldn't see further than the water. So what do you think of that response?
Well, yeah. It's just like with Katrina,
Mhm.
the dam burst. Wait a minute. It was a dam. Was it a dam that burst with Katrina? Or was it just the hurricane itself? I can't remember. Anyway, but yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. From their perspective, it would have been a worldwide flood because all they saw was water. If they did see it and, they weren't, just totally dead because of all the water. But it could be a cultural memory. It doesn't have to be because it could just be, made up. But, yeah, a local flood. Ever since I started taking the Bible not as literal, but as metaphorical. Yeah. That's been my assessment. It was a local flood, and from these people's perspectives, it was a global flood because it was just shocking, and there was water for as far as the eye could see. So yeah, I don't have any problem with you saying it was a local flood.
Okay, so now we're going to go to Deconverted Man's response. Okay. In the video, you said the event really happened and the flood really happened. If the 613 laws are not moral guidance, then where do you get moral guidance from? Okay, so expound on that, Lisa, if you do have something to expound there from. If not, let me know and I'll just continue moving forward.
Yeah, the 613 laws, I'm listening to a Jewish rabbi. His name's Tovia Singer. I don't know if you listen to him or not. He's pretty good. The 613 laws, most of them are ritualistic for Jews only. Like don't mix two fabrics together, only eat kosher, stuff like that. So most of them are meant for only Jews. The laws that are meant for all of humans aren't really found in the 613 commandments. In fact, they're not even the 10 commandments as found as a subset of the 613 laws. The rules that are meant for all of humankind are what are known as the Noahide commandments, that are found after quote unquote Noah's flood. So just that's from the rabbi. That's not from me, by the way.
Okay, so there's only like 3 replies. Oh, I don't know. Let's see. Okay, so they subdivided I don't know why YouTube's doing this. They subdivided the responses, so I have to go to a different page to view the rest. Give me 1 second, okay? All right. So I responded with, it is an iceberg. And yes, I did. But again, watch the full videos. And he responds back with where do you get your morals from the Bible? And I then say, let me turn this around. Where do you get your morals from? So, if you don't mind me, before I give you Deconverted Man's answer, Lisa, where do you get your morals from?
Me. But for wider, from the wider culture, all of us have a subjective morality. It's not, I mean, no offense to you or any religious person, but even if you say your morals come from God, that's not objective morality. That's God's subjective morality. That's just the way I look at it.
Okay. So the way that I answered back was, so let me give you his answer. So his answer was me, ethics is a nice guideline, but where in the Bible do you extract the morals? Like how? What mechanics are involved? And there's a chance that this is not Deconverted Man, but B.S. Lewis using one of his sock accounts. But that's okay. And B.S. Lewis is more than welcome to come onto the channel and defend his point of view if this was a sock account. But I respond back with this. Dude, take a hint. I am not a Bible onlyist. I am a Catholic. Aquinas, Augustine, Sun Tzu, Lao Tzu, Plato, Aristotle, Aurelius, Zeno, also the Bible. If you want to know where I get my morals from within the Bible, there is Psalms, Proverbs, and wisdom, the Sermon on the Mount, the Gospels, the parables. If you're asking where I get them in real life, my family, and through life experience, most morals are intuitions. So they may actually have a genetic basis or some kind of psychological evolutionary basis. So what do you think about my response to Deconverted Man restating the same question?
Yeah, I do believe morality has an evolutionary basis. Most people on Earth would agree that murder is wrong. You
Mhm.
have those rare psychopaths out there that say, you know, to hell with the rest of humanity, I'm going to do what I want. And, you know, but for the most part, most of us would agree, you know. But as for other things like adultery, well, according to the Bible, adultery is wrong. Let's not go with adultery.
Okay. No, it's okay. It's okay.
Um,
Let me go.
if it's consensual, but I mean, would it really be adultery at that point? But let's go with fornication. You know,
Okay.
as long as it's consensual, I don't care. You know, you do what you want as long as it's consensual.
Okay, let me move on to his next comment, and then I'll give you my ending comment, and then from there, we'll rewatch the video, and we can then have you kind of close out everything, and then if B.S. Lewis wants to come in and fight with me, he's welcome to. Okay. All right, so this is Deconverted Man's last comment. Okay, so then in the video, you suggest that morals come from the Bible. You are leaving out a lot of things, aren't you? That is my point. Do you think that I was leaving out, basically from my comments and from my very short iceberg video, that I'm leaving too many things out or a lot of things out?
Well, you did say you get your morals from the Bible, Lao Tzu,
Mm-hmm.
Augustine,
Mm-hmm.
a few others.
A bunch of others, yeah. So I was saying that
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
just get it from one place. I
Right.
get it from a composite of places. But yes, the Bible is a source that I use for my morals. And after reading the Bible for so many years, it might even be the largest source where I get my morals. But it isn't the only place that I've ever developed morals from.
Yeah, well, you could have said the Bible is one of the sources. That might be nitpicking.
Okay, so let me give you my response, and then we'll watch the video one more time, okay? I'm not sure you know what moral truths mean. What do you think I mean by the Bible is true? What do you think I mean by the Bible teaches moral truths? These are categories, and they are levels of truth. And what Catholics and Orthodox mean by true seems to be more in line with what Protestants mean when they say it contains truth. And what Catholics and Protestants mean when they say infallible seems to be completely different from each other. And I'm sure if we mean the same thing, and that's supposed to be, and I'm not sure we even mean the same thing when we say inspired. I'll have to go back and edit that. Okay. So before we go back to the video, do you have a final thought on our exchange so far?
Well, I don't know what Catholics would mean by inspired, but basically what I was taught, that this isn't what they said per se, but what came across was God just put ideas, like put his word, beam down a bunch of words that then the God's scribes would scrawl. It wasn't an inspiration like we say inspiration in modern day usage. They would say, they used inspiration to say, God said blank, and the apostles were just used as the scribes.
So for Catholics, when we talk about inspiration, we view it in the same way we view the homeostasis of Jesus Christ. So, or the hypostatic union, I should say, of Jesus Christ. So what we're saying is that the work of the Bible is truly a work of God, but it's also truly a work of man. So the human author is completely the author, subject to his limitations, to his knowledge, to his abilities. So when we are talking about what the Bible says, we don't know where the dividing line between what's inspired and what's just the writer's opinion. So we take it all very carefully, but we understand that the human can be anachronistic, can get facts wrong, can get dates wrong. And we don't have any problem admitting that that's present within the Bible, because the Bible contains God's truth. It is not itself God's truth. So it contains God's truth. The Bible is really inspired. The Bible really is the word of God, but it's also the work of a human man and all the editors and compilers and everyone else who's had anything to ever do with it. And not every editor or compiler is inspired. So that's kind of the way that we look at it.
Yeah, that's not at all what Protestants
mean. Yeah, I know.
mean.
All right. So now that we've had the argument and we've gone through it and we've gone through each thing, let's re-listen to my video, and then I'm going to let you tear it up as much as you can. And if B.S. Lewis is still listening and he wants to tear it up, he's welcome to come on. And if anyone else wants to come on, you're welcome. All right, here we go.
Bible is inspired truth. The Exodus happened. There was a great flood. People did migrate in and out of Egypt. Mesopotamia did flood. The Bible is a polemic against false truths. One of these groups might have been Semitic. Flood stories exist. These stories are countering other culture stories of the same events. The Bible contains and preserves factuals and truths in narrative forms. The polemic is based on a myth that is based on a true event. Semitic people were in Egypt. There was a local flood. The Bible teaches moral truths. The Bible is
So
inspired.
now that we've gone through the argument, and now that we've listened to the video twice, what is your either tear down or your, even if it's positive or negative, what's your understanding of what I said, and is it right? Is it wrong? What do you think?
Well, now that you've explained, I didn't really understand what you meant by some of this stuff. But now that you've explained it, I pretty much basically agree, you know,
Okay.
especially with the especially when you explain inspiration, because like I said, that's not what Protestants mean when they say inspiration.
Okay, well, I think that's going to be the end of the video today. Lisa, thank you for coming on. You're welcome to come on anytime. And
Absolutely.
usually I'm not in StreamYard. I was on StreamYard today because I wanted Deconverted Man to show up. Unfortunately, he did not. I appreciate very much, Lisa, you taking the role of Deconverted Man. And if it was a sock account, whoever did the sock account is cowardly for not coming on to debate me. But
Well,
that being said, oh, go ahead.
I don't know how much I did Deconverted Man. You know,
Justice,
we all have our own perspectives.
of course.
So, you know,
But you were a
I
good voice. Yeah.
I hope I added something, you know.
Well, anyway, I'm going to call it a night. Lisa, have yourself a great night. Everybody in the audience, have a great night. I'll see you all
Yeah,
tomorrow.
you too. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.